So it's wonderful to be back inside Smith Center for another episode of TV Time. Today's guest is somebody that really shaped my experience as an undergrad, Coach Mike Jarvis. It's so great to have you back inside Smith.
I can't tell you how happy, excited, and how blessed I feel today to be back in this special place.
Terrific. Well, let's start there. What does it feel like for you when you get back onto campus, back into Foggy Bottom, and you walk through the doors of Smith Center?
Well, it's almost impossible to really tell you what I really feel, how much I feel. I once again, I feel blessed to have been here in the first place, and then to be able to come back and to just over the years watch the evolution of the university, and the rebirth again of the basketball program, and it was the only place. I tell people all the time, my wife, who will be joining me today, was the only place that when we left, she cried. It was that special place, and I know she'll have the same kind of emotions today when she comes on campus.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. There were so many special years, and I was sharing with you before we started filming today. The Sweet 16 year was my freshman year in college, and so that was an amazing experience for everybody on campus. But you had so many great years. So talk more about that experience of being a head coach here.
Well, when I came to GW, I was recruited by Bob Chernak, the vice president.
Yeah.
He started recruiting me, and I didn't even know it when I was at BU and he was at Hartford. And I remember one day he said to me, he says, I'm not going to be at Hartford forever, and I don't think you're going to be at BU forever, and if I ever go to a really, really great school, I'm going to call you. And he did. And when he called me, I think the year he called me, I think GW might have been like 1 in 27 or something. And I said, you sure you want me to go there? He says, listen, let me tell you something. It's a special place. There's only one nation's capital. Together we can make something happen. And I believed him, I trusted him, and when I came and I felt, there was a spirit here that I felt maybe it was Red, Auerbach, or George Washington himself, but I felt like this could be a special place, and sure enough, it is and was.
Terrific. Well, let's talk a little bit about Red. Not everybody knows this, but this chair is red in our arena because this is the place that Red Auerbach sat.
That's right.
When he watched games. And being a Boston native, born and bred in the Boston area, what does Red Auerbach mean to you, and how did he influence your life?
Well, I could write a book on just the experiences I had with Red. A lot of the things that I do have in my books. The stories about Red. Well, first of all, the first game I ever went to, my brother saved up enough money to take me to see the Celtics play, and they played the Philadelphia Warriors.
Okay.
And it was Bill Russell's first game. And I always tell people he got about 40 rebounds that night. The Celtics won. I fell in love not only with the game of basketball, but I fell in love with Boston Celtics basketball, particularly because of the way Red Auerbach coached. And I didn't realize it at the time, but he was he became sort of like my hero. I mean, I'd watch him coach, I'd watch how he interacted with the players, I watched how he put his teams together, and I'd like to say that I tried to copy as many things as I could about Red. And a couple of things, I found out later was that Red Auerbach, this was his school, and he used to come to not only the games but to practices. And every spring we would sit in my office across the street, and we would talk about life, talk about about coaching, philosophy, about how to manage people. And Red told me a few things. The first time I ever met him in person was at the Hall of Fame in Massachusetts, and he says to me, he says, "Hey kid," he says, "you're doing a pretty good job with that Ewan player. He's going to be a great player." And then he says to me, he says, he says, "I may not always be right, but I've never been wrong." And it was so true. And then I remember at one of those meetings we had in my office on 22nd Street, he said to me, he says, he says, "One bit of advice I want to give you He says recruit character, not characters. And I'll never forget that, recruit character, not characters. And you know, and it's so true that if you're going to build a great team and have a great family, then it's got to be with people of great character. And so I mean, I spent a lot of time with Red, you know, having Chinese food and talking about life. And then of course, like I said, I grew up with Red Auerbach.
I love it, and the idea of recruiting character. We see so many programs where things have gone wrong, and typically it feeds back to having people that have struggled with their character and their decision making.
Sure.
Talk about that when you were recruiting to GW, because again, these are many of my friends. You know, I think of whether it's Nimbo or Kwame or it's funny. It's like we've just inducted a few more into the Hall of Fame, and they're just such wonderful people, wonderful humans. Share what it was like to coach such great men of character, of high character.
Well, first of all, in order to coach men of high character, you gotta have good assistants that recognize what you want and help you get it. And I had some great assistants that found great kids, many of whom you mentioned. And, you know, and then we had great support. When I came here, not only did we have Bob Chernak and at that time Steve Bilski and then later Jack Cavance and, you know, just so many great, like, associates of the program and great fans. But we also had somebody very special, and I want to mention her name because I don't think we would have ever been able to do what we did at GW without Karen Urkel.
Of course.
Karen was, I mean, she was the best academic advisor, mentor that I've ever had. I mean, she was incredible. And so we had Karen, and then we had my wife, Connie, who was like the, you know, the substitute mom or aunt or grandmother. And we just had a real family. And so what happened was when kids came here, and you know, we also decided that we had to do something a little different because we were competing against Georgetown and Maryland at that time. So we said, you know what, let's go the international route. So fortunately for us, the kids that we first recruited from overseas, you know, Sasha Alexander Cool and Yegor Masharikov and you know, for just so many of those guys from overseas. And then they brought other quality guys with them. And then, of course, Kevin Clark was one of my assistants, and he had a relationship with one of the coaches in Maryland, and we were able to get Shante Rogers and Kwame Evans and Patrick Nagumba. And then, of course, you know, Vaughn Jones and Kimbo, Nimbo. And I mean, it was just, I mean, if we had that team now playing in college, we'd be in the top 10 in college basketball.
No doubt.
I mean, those and Alvin Pearsall, Sonny Hall, and I could go on. And you know, I probably shouldn't have named half the guys I did because I'm leaving out more than half of the guys. But they all know that every single one of them had a great impact on building this program.
There's no question about that, and I love hearing all that. The links that you have, the importance of assistant coaches, the strength of GW as a university in attracting international students still exists today. Karen Urkel is a great name, and I don't know if you realize that, but we brought Karen out of retirement.
She texted me just the other day and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to miss you and Connie." You know, we went to kids. She came to my son's and daughter's weddings. We went to her daughter's wedding, Kelly, and it's all family. And that's the thing that existed here, probably more than any other place I've ever been, other than back at home in Cambridge at the high school, is the family. And you know, we built a family. I mean, a real family. I mean, my wife would cook for weeks to prepare meals for the guys. The NCAA, CBS used to love to come to our house for the selection Sunday. I mean, the things that went on here. I mean, you just can't, it'll never be duplicated. When I talk to Bob Chernak, I think we both, you know, want to cry sometime over the phone. You know?
It's so special.
It is.
You know what I'll share is during his press conference, Jamie and Christian spoke of the fact that he was growing up in Southern Virginia and he was watching GW basketball and watching you coach on the sideline. It's really, you were a huge part of his introduction to basketball, and I think he feels a responsibility to continue to build forward, but also to return us to our roots. You've had a chance to watch Jamie and coach. What are some of your early observations of the work that he's doing?
Well, you know what? First of all, I think Jamie, number one, understands the responsibility that takes place when you coach a program like GW. So I think he's totally invested in the program. And the thing I really like more than anything else about Jamie, and I think, is the fact that not only can he teach and coach, but he has a great way with young people. I mean, I just feel like these kids are playing extra hard for him because they know how much he cares about them. And it's true that, when kids realize you care about them, they will care about you. And in this day and age, it's so difficult to get kids to really buy into a work ethic that includes a lot of work on fundamentals and just a lot of work on defense as well as offense. And but I see him doing that, and the team's getting better. And that's the other thing about a coach is a good coach's teams improve as the year goes on. You can see game by game improvement, and I can see that in this team.
Terrific. I was doing a little research as I prepared for this conversation, and I recognized that in one of your books you speak of the 7 C's of leadership. Could you share a little bit about that, about the 7 C's, and how you wove those C's into your own leadership style?
Well, I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to lead, and that's the great thing about, you write a book and other people read it, but when you read it yourself, you find out more about yourself and about what you need to do. So the 7 C's of leadership basically is about experiences that not only I've had, but experiences I relate to the walk, through the Bible. And so it's a faith-based but yet realistic book that encompasses lessons learned and still being learned along the way. And the 7 C's are confidence, because you can't do anything if you don't have confidence and know who you are and whose you are. And then courage, but courage comes through encouragement, and that's what coaches have to do with players. And then character, like Red spoke about, communication, community, building a team and a family. So all the C's are basically a result of, I guess, having lived a long and very enjoyable life. And I just try to share those with people if I can.
I love that. I love the idea of grabbing those lessons that you read about in the Bible and really bringing it into your work. It's fantastic. There were a lot of special years when you were here, but I spoke of that Sweet 16 year, and it's a year that we continue to talk about, even 20 plus years after the fact. We have high hopes of getting back to the Sweet 16 and then surpassing that mark. But are there some favorite memories that you have from that year in particular?
Well, it's crazy. I go back to a game. Lots of things happened that year. Probably the most special thing of all was that my son came to work with me as my assistant. And so that was the first year that my son and I actually coached together, and sat on a bench together, and we did that for like 20 years. That was the thing. My dad passed away in February of '93. He passed away at a time when we were right around 500, and a game that we won at Rutgers that we tied up in the last 1.6 seconds of the game to send into overtime, and that sent us on a winning streak. So Mike's joining me, my dad's passing, and that victory that propelled us on to get a berth in the NCAA tournament as a 12 seed. We go out to Arizona. And we play and we beat New Mexico, 5 seed, and then we're I mean, and then we go on to Seattle,
Yeah.
and we play the Fab Five, and we almost beat them.
We had them.
If we had boxed out a couple of times and got rebounds or missed free throws, on their missed free throws, we win the game.
Yeah.
And it probably would have been the biggest upset in the history of basketball.
Incredible.
But I mean, that whole year, I mean, just going from here to Arizona, and then Bob Chernak saying, hey, we're not going back home again. Karen, call up, get all the books shipped out here. We're going right to Seattle. We go to Seattle.
Yeah.
I mean, the place, there's 40,000 people. We're on CBS, millions of people watching. And the announcers are saying, what are we doing with this game?
Yeah.
Michigan's going to kill them.
Right.
Well, they changed their tune before halftime.
So fun.
So it was great.
Yeah. So fun, and like I mentioned, we speak of it often, but the years that you were coaching here are really, they give everybody here a beacon, a place where we can look to and say, listen, we can get back there. We know we can. We believe we've got the coach. We know we've got the student athletes, and we're going to continue to fill that pipeline to hopefully continue your legacy. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, you know what? I thank you, and I mean, you know, every time somebody speaks about, you know, a legacy, I used to always think, that word doesn't apply to most people. But you know, it's a blessing for people to think that you are part of a legacy, and to be part of this school's legacy, and to be part of this guy's legacy, because this is the guy right here,
Yeah.
Red Auerbach, and you know, his spirit will always be in this building. And when he talked about GW, and he talked about the fact that I would love it here, he was so right. And like he said to me, I may not always be right, Mike, but I've never been wrong. And he certainly was not wrong about that. And I'm glad I listened to him and Bob Chernak, and that my wife agreed to take this journey with me. And we're just happy to be back.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that your wife decided to take the journey with you, and that you spent time here. One of the things we talk about here at GW are these only at GW moments.
Right.
There's definitely a moment here when Bill and Chelsea were in the building. I was standing with about 3,000 students. Yeah, they were right over there.
That was my sister's box. My sister Trudy, I said to her, Trudy, you're not going to be able to sit in your seats tonight. She says, what do you mean, Michael? I says, well, they got a couple of people coming that are going to take your seats over by eminent domain. Happens to be the Clintons. She says, really? Well, that's okay.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then,
we were
of course,
playing #1 UMass that game.
That's right.
And beat them.
Beat 'em.
It was
Beat 'em.
amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah, our kids were tough.
It was terrific. And again, we were, as students, we were sardined standing, because those were wooden bleachers over there, standing side by side, almost like this. We were crammed in the building. I'm sure we were violating some fire code.
Yeah, probably.
But it was amazing. Other than that, what are some of your favorite kind of only at GW moments?
Oh, you know what? I'll tell you, one of my favorite moments was our first victory here in this building. You know, I came and my mom would say, Mike, are you sure you made the right choice to move to Washington, D.C.? When are you coming home to Massachusetts? I said, Mom, I made the right place. So she came down for my very first game. It was at Maryland, Loyola, Maryland. And we lost. And my mom after the game said, you sure you made the right choice? I said, yes. So anyhow, we came back the next day and we practiced, and there was a couple of guys that had tricked me. I thought they really understood what we wanted to do. Ellis McKinney was one of them. And Ellis thought he was a three-point shooter. And I'll never forget, I said, Ellis, your three-point shooting days are over. Yeah. And the rest of you guys, we're going to start playing winning basketball. The next game we played was at home against St. Joe's. Phil Martelli was coaching. And we played the way that I knew the kids could play. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I says, I think I made the right choice. But I'll never forget that game. And then obviously there's we had so many games. I mean, whether it was against, and in fact, last week, I think it was last week, President's Day, you know, we used to have the President's Day game. And
sometimes noon,
sometime noon. Lefty Drizel at the time was coaching at James Madison.
Yeah.
And we would bring Lefty in and beat him up here at GW. Of course, we didn't lose too many games. And of course, the UMass game.
Yeah.
You know, with the Clintons and beating them when they were #1 and having Bill come down to the locker room after the game.
That's
and
fantastic.
I mean,
yeah.
unbelievable memories, you know?
Yeah. Well, my last question to you, I've been
Yeah.
asking all of our guests. I find D.C. and Foggy Bottom to be one of the best places on earth. When you come back to Washington, D.C., is there a special place, a monument, a museum, a memorial, a restaurant? Is there a place that you and Connie or the kids gather and really enjoy?
You know what? Every day when I came in, I would come in, every time I'd come in with Connie or fly in, I'd say, boy, this is such a beautiful city. And you look at like you'd see that whole panoramic, that view from the monuments on down. And I think it was our 25th anniversary was celebrated when we were here in DC. And I remember getting a limo and just going around to all the monuments and having a toast with Washington, and I go with Abe, and and the monument, and then at the Capitol, and so many. I mean, every one of the monuments were special, and we tried to celebrate it, each and every one of them.
That's such a great story.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you being here today. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
I know the audience will. Like I said, you are a legend here. You can't look up at our banners and not see your fingerprints all over them. So
well,
thank you.
you know what? Someday, maybe there'll be I don't know, maybe there'll be a big J up there for Jarvis. I don't know, but you know what? I mean, I am in the Hall of Fame here, and that was another proud, very proud moment. But to look up and see, the banners of those championship teams and those years that we were here, and then just to see how this place continues to evolve. It's wonderful, and if I was 20 years younger, I'd probably be coaching here again. I would have made sure that I sent my henchmen here, Marty Lewis included, and that you hired me. But I am so glad that he's the coach here, and I'll be rooting for him, and I'll be rooting for the Colonials until the day, I leave this place. But it's great to be back, and
Awesome.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Continue to do it, and I'm glad you brought Karen back.
Well, that was an easy decision.
Well, I'm glad she came back.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you.
All right.
Great seeing you.
Wonderful to see you.
All right.
Well, that's another episode of TV Time. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again.